Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, continuing our deep dive into this Nebraska football program heading into the 2024 season. We took a look at the offensive line, the defensive line. Now we're taking a look at the offensive skill. And Dill, this is the unit that if you see Nebraska take massive steps in the right direction year two under Matt Rhule, I think it falls on the shoulders of these position groups. And you look across the board, quarterback play, adding a five-star like Dylan Raiola, adding Danny Kalen. The quarterback room, I think, is more talented, and it's better than it was in 2023. You look at the wide receiver room, adding guys like Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nayor. I mean, this is a group that has a lot more playmaking and veteran playmaking heading into 2024. And then the running back room, you're getting guys back healthy. Dante Dowdle comes in. You have a ton of depth and talent in the running back room. So all three phases, you look at this Nebraska team and say they got better at all three positions. And I think you're really excited about what that can translate in 2024 because make no mistake about it, this Nebraska team is winning a lot more football games in 2023 had that passing attack been better. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. And as always, a shout out to the Nebraska fans. The amount of support you guys have shown the boys over the last couple of weeks, it means the world. All the Go Big Reds in the comment section, we appreciate that. Can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And more importantly, would love to hear from you guys in terms of what this offensive skill position groups are going to look like. Your leading passers, leading rushers, leading receivers. Drop it in the comment section. We'll chop it up. Dill, I'm going to give you the T-box. Let's start with the position group that I think everyone wants to talk about first, and that is this quarterback right here.
And I think I'm kind of with you. It's pretty cut and dry of what Nebraska's problems were for the most part last year, and that emanated mostly from that quarterback room. Made a lot of mistakes, weren't accurate enough, obviously. And frankly, I think with Dylan Raiola, you're bringing in a quarterback who I think is wise beyond his years in some sense from a football perspective. He's obviously grown up with a lot of, football's in that family's blood, clearly. And then he goes over to play at Buford for his final year of high school. That's a program that they play almost a college level schedule. Those teams around them are amazing. Buford's really, really loaded too. And they expect a lot of their quarterbacks. They run a scheme that I think does challenge you a little bit at that spot. And it should prepare Dylan Raiola, I think, to play early at Nebraska. And frankly, I think Nebraska really needs him to because they need to somehow unlock this offense. You kind of look last year, they didn't trust those quarterbacks at all. They had a really basic passing attack, kind of the one read. If it's not there, tuck it and run kind of offense. And I think it's hard to develop wide receiver talent there. I think it's hard to develop those skill guys. And I think they just need someone to where those coaches can believe in at the end
of the day. I think you hit it right on the head with Dylan Raiola. And what the question about true freshmen playing year one at the college football level doesn't really have to do with arm talent. Like all these five-star quarterbacks, these top 10 quarterbacks in their position groups, like they have the arm talent. And you watch Dylan Raiola, you know he certainly has the arm talent. What it comes down to with Dylan Raiola and whether he plays as a true freshman or not is what's between the ears. Like, can he grasp this offense, go through his progressions, process at the speed he needs to at the college football level? And you said it best. Like this Buford offense, that is a college football offense, right? They go under center. They run play action. They have him addressing the offensive protection at the line of scrimmage. Right, this is not one of those kind of spread you out playing 7-on-7 at the high school level offenses. Dylan Raiola was asked a lot, and you take a look at what he did, 34 touchdowns to only 1 interception. You talk about being ready to play not only physically, but between the ears because of Dylan Raiola's time at Buford. And you said it best, playing against a ton of competition in that state. I think he's going to be ready to go early, and I think this means massive things for this Nebraska offense. And obviously you have a guy like Harburg, you have a guy like Danny Kalen. You feel pretty good about what you have in that quarterback room, but make no mistake about it. I think Dylan Raiola is going to be ready, not only physically, but between the ears to play early for this Nebraska offense. But I think the conversation that kind of gets lost is, yes, the quarterback play left a lot to be desired in 2023. The wide receiver room was extremely young. So although they didn't trust the quarterback entirely, they had a lot of true freshman wide receivers that weren't necessarily as developed as you would have liked, right? With all the injuries that they had to endure, they had to rely on a lot of young wide receivers to play a lot. And I think that expedited their development process, but I also think was a result of why you saw kind of a watered down offense, right? Not understanding the playbook, not really having a fully developed route tree as true freshmen. You look at this wide receiver room heading into 2024. You add a guy like Isaiah Neyor. You add a guy like Jamal Banks. You have a bunch of young talent that is going into year two. This is the group that I think takes massive strides in 2024.
Yeah, and I think getting Jamal Banks was huge because you kind of look back at that last year for Nebraska. I'm with you. The quarterback play, not good enough, clearly. But I also thought they really did struggle to beat man coverage at times. Again, you started to see Malachi Coleman start to emerge physically, start to be a handful, was drawing some penalties late in those years, like in that Purdue game, that Michigan State game, which you like to see. But at the end of the day, there was too much getting stuck in your routes, too much not being open, not being able to get off physical coverage. And again, a lot of that is freshman kind of growing pains that you kind of expect, and they were all pressed into duty, obviously due to some injuries. But I think having a guy like Jamal Banks where you can kind of, well, if you're going to go one-on-one and play press coverage with him, you're kind of in for it. I mean, physically big, imposing, really moves well for that size, and a guy who is really hard to deal with in man coverage.
What excites me most about this wide receiver, and we talk about this a lot, you kind of want your pass catcher room to kind of embody like a basketball team where you have a lot of different wide receivers that can do a lot of different things. Just like on the basketball court, you got your rebounders, you got your shooters, you got your passers. You look at this wide receiver room, I mean, Isaiah Neyor, he's a guy that back at Wyoming in 2021, before he goes down with the ACL injury, was a deep threat, one of the better deep threats that we saw in college football. 45 catches for over 870 yards, 20 yards per catch. You talk about a big physical frame that can track the football down the field. That's Isaiah Neyor. And we all know Dylan Raiola throws a phenomenal deep ball. Then you have a guy like Jamal Banks, like you said, a guy that is going to work that short intermediate route tree better than anybody else on this roster. And so when it's 3rd and 6 and you need a guy to separate, sit it down in zone coverage, find that soft spot, get open, present yourself to the quarterback, I mean, Jamal Banks is going to do that. And then you start talking about the young cats. Malachi Coleman, I feel like you can't forget. I mean, he's 6'4", runs a 10.5 100-meter dash time. That is, he'll be the fastest player on the football field most fields he steps on. You talk about getting that deep threat going, attacking the deeper third with Dylan Raiola, who has a howitzer of an arm. I think Malachi Coleman is going to benefit from a quarterback that can really attack that deeper third. And Bill, I know you have a couple freshmen that you want to talk about as well as maybe taking that step in year two.
And for me, the guy who looked frankly most developed for me was Jaden Doss. I actually thought he had a really good year. I think they missed him on too many routes, but he was one of those guys that if they left him open and he had his opportunity to get vertical, he did a pretty good job doing that, and that was beating man coverage. And Lloyd was like, he's obviously an electric athlete. You can very clearly see that, but I do think he needs to be used in a little bit of a different way. He needs to have space created for him to an extent. He was one who I really thought struggled at times to get off of press coverage, but when he had some space, you kind of saw the electricity. He obviously caught for a handful of deep balls, and if they can kind of use him in the way that most benefits him, which again, I think is putting him in good opportunities, whether that's bunching him up, getting him some space off the line so he can release, he looks really good too. So again, I think you do have some guys, but that to me, it all goes back to getting two guys, frankly, who are more experienced, are really good against man coverage and are hard to deal with, because you do have talent in that room, but I think you needed to add some skill sets that could, in those tough moments, beat a guy.
And you needed some veterans, right? Like you didn't want to go with the true freshman quarterback throwing to year two wide receivers. Like that's not a great recipe. So they go out and get some veterans. A guy like Jalen Lloyd, I'm with you on terms of like the development that needs to take place. I think you'll see that in year two. Like when you're a true freshman, like you're going up against a fifth-year senior that's putting hands on you, they're not used to that kind of physicality. And so Jalen Lloyd, another guy that runs a 10.5 100-meter, ton of speed, is a guy that I think in year two gets a little bit more comfortable creating separation, dealing with physicality at the line of scrimmage. And as much as it was painful to watch all those injuries and have to run and rely on true freshmen, I think that significantly helps their development curve heading into 2024. A lot of these guys played a lot of football in 2023, and I think they can be playmakers in 2024. And I think the position group that you don't want to miss out on when you're talking about the pass catchers is that tight end room. And I will be banging the table for a guy like Thomas Fidone till he's no longer wearing a Nebraska uniform. And this is a guy that you don't see many of those guys come along. The catch radius that he has, the movement skills, the physicality. He's a guy that I think I think is still kind of knocking off some rust in terms of all those injuries and just not really being on the football field all that much early on in his career. You see him, you see his ability to kind of be that matchup nightmare, too big for safeties to work on, too fast for linebackers to work on. And I think when you look at developing a young quarterback like Dylan Raiola, having a big body that can work the middle of the field, I mean, Thomas Fidone, I think, is going to be in for a big year in 2024 as well.
Yeah, and again, that was kind of one of those units we were talking about going into that 2023 season. You wanted to see a big year because you throw in Berkshire, obviously had some moments in the spring game that made you think he could have a really productive year. And again, I'm not sure it was all their fault in the tight end room because at the end of the day, the quarterback play kind of sunk everything to a certain level.
Yes.
But I do think opening up this offense will probably help those tight ends because I think there was that element. You didn't need to play the boundary super hard against Nebraska because you didn't have the wideouts who are just beating you up at that position. I think if you open this up a little bit, you have a guy like Nair who can stretch the field. You have Jamal Banks, and then you have some wideouts come again, as we mentioned, hopefully take a step and develop. I think if they start needing to play a whole field instead of just being able to pack that middle and deal with those tight ends who were kind of the weapons last year, I think that should open it up a lot for these guys. And I think Dylan Raiola, again, going back to him, is part of that key because he is one of those quarterbacks more so than probably anyone else they had on the roster last year who can get anywhere on the field.
I think that's a really good point. Like the development that you see from the boundary wide receivers, which again just kind of was non-existent for Nebraska in 2023, is going to massively help a guy like Thomas Fidone because when you have all the speed on the field and that deep threat presence with Dylan Raiola and what he can do with the wide receivers that can test the deeper third with speed, what does that have to do with the safeties? And the safeties are playing back out there. And so you have that middle of the field that I think is going to have a lot of space. And you go back and watch that Nebraska offense, it just didn't seem like there was a lot of space to operate from. I think that was a large result of just not having a dynamic passing attack and having defenses kind of squeeze down on you because they know you're not going to really attack that deeper third. We'll throw out Carter Nelson too, a guy that doesn't get into Nebraska till the summer, but from a physical standpoint, like, again, God don't make many of those. And so Carter Nelson is going to be a guy that physically probably will maybe get some burn early as a true freshman. I'll end this conversation with the wide receivers at this, and I would love to hear from the Nebraska fans in the comments section. Who leads the team in receiving yards for this Nebraska Cornhuskers offense in 2024?
I mean, for me, it's Jamal Banks.
Yeah, me too.
A lot, but he was so good at Wake Forest. Again, I don't think anyone who plays at Wake Forest gets the credit they deserve. I'm sure you know that as an alum. That school, it's just not a very relevant football program. They don't get a ton of credit. But he was awesome last year. It was a bad team, not great quarterback play, but he did his thing. I think he's going to have a huge year for this. And
he's going to be the go-to guy in this offense. He's going to be the go-to guy in this offense. And again, Malachi Coleman, Isaiah Nair, those guys are going to get theirs. But when it is 3rd and 6 and you need someone to sit it down in zone coverage to create separation, and man, like Jamal Banks is going to be that guy. He's going to lead the team in targets. I think he's going to lead the team in catches and also lead the team in receiving yards. That's my take as well. Last position group, though, that we got to look at, the running back room. And I think what stands out to me the most is just the depth and the versatility that you have, right? You go back to last year, you head into the season with, all right, Gabe Ervin we like, Ramir Johnson, and Anthony Grant. And Gabe Ervin goes down, Ramir Johnson goes down, Anthony Grant can't hold on to the football. So you're kind of forced to play Emmett Johnson, who I think was in fall camp kind of a scout team running back 4 on that depth chart. He was kind of thrusted into that running back 1 role. And now you look at this unit in 2024, Nebraska wants to run the football. We just spent 15 minutes talking about the passing attack. Make no mistake about it. This is a Nebraska team that wants to win the line of scrimmage, run the football. What stands out to me is, one, it's deep. You have 4 guys that I think you trust, and Dante Dowdle coming in through the portal, Gabe Ervin coming back from injury, Ramir Johnson back, and Emmett Johnson. That 4 guys you trust carrying the rock. But more importantly, 4 guys that do a lot of different things, right? Gabe Ervin is an absolute hammer, right? Absorbs contact, gets downhill, runs violently. Dante Dowdle, very similar. Both guys that are 215 plus. Then you have guys like Ramir Johnson and Emmett Johnson, who are more of your spacey guys that if you're trying to get out in space, those are the guys you want to have the football. I think the depth is certainly there. You're going to be able to keep guys fresh and healthy through the duration of the season. But more importantly, you got running backs that do a lot of different things. I think that's massive for Nebraska heading into 2024.
And that was probably one of the huge things. You kind of saw when Gabe Ervin went down, they couldn't really run the ball in the same fashion that they wanted to, where they had like or like 3 tight ends maybe in some cases and really just go hammer time on teams. And again, you add a guy like Dowdle who has that capability to play more the way that, again, Gabe Irving wanted to play, and probably the way, frankly, that Matt Rhule wants to run the ball, which is ultra physical, ultra hard. And then you get to mix in guys like Emmett Johnson or Ramir Johnson to do some things where if you can get them in space, they're obviously, I think that's where those two want to be operating. I thought Emmett Johnson, again, for kind of what you mentioned in the circumstances he was put into, phenomenal. Really did a good job. Yeah. Like, he was very encouraged by what you saw from him. I thought he started to develop in terms of how he ran the ball inside. So again, I think you just have an offense that, again, you can deal with kind of the attrition of a season and deal with the injuries and be able to kind of keep rolling instead of needing to make changes based on the person.
Yeah, it seemed like, I do agree with that. They had to significantly I mean, for one, the injuries that they had to deal with, I've never seen a team have to deal with that many injuries. That was an incredible amount of injuries, but they had to significantly alter what they wanted to do based on their personnel. They'll end this with this. Now, again, would love to hear from the Nebraska fans on your projections. Who's the leading rusher, I should say, for this Nebraska offense in 2024?
And honestly, it's hard to say because to me, it's going to be Dowdle or Gabe Irving, and I really don't know who. I think those two run the way that Nebraska wants to run. You hear everything from Matt Rhule. It sounds like, I mean, you just know they want to play physical. And those two are two of the guys, but I guess I don't know how you know which one of those are going to get most of the touches because you really don't know a ton about what Dowdle is at that college level. Obviously, a big-time prospect coming out of high school.
I'm going to go Gabe Irvin, and I'll stamp it. Like, this is not me knocking Ramir Johnson, Emmett Johnson, Dante Dowdle. Again, you have 4 backs, and I think in a perfect world, a lot of them are getting a lot of carries, and you're keeping all of those guys fresh, and all of them are doing their thing. I go back to Gabe Irvin and how he was running the football when healthy. That is kind of what I think Matt Rhule wants this offense to look like. Just absolute downhill hammer, absorb contact, fall forward, get those hidden yards. Gabe Irvin does that. I think Dante Dowdle too as well can. So I think you're going to see those guys kind of be leaned on. But man, Gabe Irvin, I feel like it's so easy to forget what he looked like when he was healthy. I'm excited for this unit. Like, you look at this Nebraska team, we'll say it and I'll close it on this. This offense, I think it cost them a lot of games in 2023. There were a lot of growing pains. And this 2024 unit, they get better across the board. And I think that defense, we've already said, is going to be really, really good year 2 under Tony White. Very excited about this team. Very excited about this specific position group. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Again, can't thank y'all enough for all the support. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.